Welcome to the deep dive, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
So this time we're going deep into the world of mind management, not time management.
Right.
And our source material is super interesting. It's like we get to read someone's personal journal, a diary of how they tried to become more productive.
Yeah, it's really cool because you get to see all the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Exactly. And we get to follow this person from a takeout-filled Chicago apartment all the way to the streets of Medellin.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
It is.
So our author, they actually start by hitting a wall with traditional time management.
Yeah.
They were doing everything right, squeezing in tasks, cutting out all the unnecessary stuff. They sold all their furniture.
Wow. Minimalist.
Yeah. But there's a limit.
Right.
They were hitting a point of diminishing returns. How much more can you really squeeze in?
Yeah.
Who wants to eat takeout on the floor every night?
Not me.
No. So that was kind of their starting point.
Right. I think it shows how just focusing on time, just cramming more in.
Yeah.
It can actually backfire.
Absolutely.
Affect your well-being even.
For sure.
Yeah.
So then we get to this really cool turning point, the Costa Rica Epiphany.
Mm-hmm.
They were supposed to be laser focused on writing their book.
Right.
But they got lost
on
a gravel road.
Okay.
And had this chance encounter that totally shifted their perspective.
Wow.
They literally stumbled upon the idea of mind management.
So cool how these unplanned detours can actually be so valuable.
It's true.
Yeah.
So what is mind management?
Okay, so mind management is it's a shift in focus.
Okay.
From the external constraints, how much time you have,
Yeah.
to your internal conditions,
Oh, interesting.
what's going on in your mind.
Okay, so it's not about how can I fit more into my day.
Right.
It's what mental state helps me do my best work.
Exactly.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
No, the author talks about finding a creative sweet spot.
Right.
And they had writer's block. And they're saying it wasn't about being super alert or anything.
Yeah.
It was about finding this mental space where the creativity just flows.
Yeah, totally. And that sweet spot, it's going to be different for everybody. It's about understanding your own personal rhythms.
For sure. Now, get this. They talk about word triads, and I love this example. Pime, crab, sauce.
Weird.
Random. It illustrates how these creative insights just pop up sometimes out of nowhere.
It's true. It's we don't always get there in a step-by-step way.
Yeah.
It's boom, it just hits you.
Yeah.
And these word triads are a fun way to practice,
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, making those unexpected connections in your brain, it gets you ready to be more creative in real life.
Yeah.
Like Archimedes in the bathtub eureka.
Yeah. And to explain this brain stuff, the author talks about the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of the brain.
I like that.
Right. So it's in charge of planning and decisions, all that. But sometimes it can actually get in the way of creativity.
Yeah, it's trying to be so organized and in control.
Yeah.
That it's it's stopping those random ideas from bouncing around.
Right, yeah. They actually use this image of the brain being a racquetball court. The ideas are the balls, and they need to collide.
Oh, I like that.
But if the CEO's standing there in the middle,
not gonna happen.
No collisions, no new ideas.
Exactly.
So how do we encourage those collisions,
Good question.
to get to that creative sweet spot? Well, they have this first hour rule.
Oh, yeah.
Spend the first hour of your day working on your most important creative stuff.
Got it.
Because early in the day, you don't have as many emails and meetings
That's true.
to derail you.
Right.
And you can kind of capitalize on that freshness.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They say even if you're a little bit groggy.
Wait, groggy?
Yeah,
I thought we had to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed to do our best work.
Apparently not. They even use sleep deprivation sometimes strategically.
Really?
Yeah, for certain types of thinking.
Okay, that's a little scary for me.
Maybe we'll save sleep deprivation for another time.
Okay, yeah.
They also talk about this idea of switching from clock time to event time. And they experienced this when they lived in Medellin, in Colombia.
Interesting.
It's a different way of relating to time. Clock time is you're always racing the clock.
Got it.
But event time is more about going with the flow.
Oh.
The natural flow of things. And guess what? They actually ended up writing the equivalent of 2 books in 1 year.
Wow.
When they were in Medellin.
That's amazing how just releasing that pressure of the clock can actually unlocks so much potential.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of finding your rhythm, they go into this whole thing about creative cycles.
Okay.
And building a weekly routine that supports those cycles.
Right.
And they get really radical here. Uh-oh. What'd they do?
They keep Mondays and Tuesdays completely meeting-free
No way.
to maximize their creative time.
That's awesome.
Prefrontal Mondays, they call it.
Prefrontal Mondays. I love it.
I know, right? I don't know if my boss would be happy about that.
Maybe not.
But the point is, being intentional about your schedule.
Totally. Yeah.
Understanding when your brain's really ready to be creative.
For sure. Aligning your work with your energy levels makes so much sense.
So we've talked about finding your sweet spot, blocking out distractions, working with your natural rhythms. But what about when you're just stuck? Even when you're trying to do all the right things?
Yeah. What about that?
Well, the author talks about the minimum creative dose.
Okay.
Just doing little bursts of focused work.
Gotcha.
And then allowing for what they call incubation, like letting your brain just process things.
Oh, so it's not about working nonstop.
Right.
It's about giving yourself those breaks, that downtime. Exactly. And they use this great example of learning Spanish by watching the first 20 minutes of a movie over and over again.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It sounds crazy, but it works.
So even small efforts consistently
Yeah.
can lead to big results.
It's like planting a seed,
Yeah.
and you have to give it time to sprout.
Exactly.
So small efforts, consistency, and a little downtime.
Gotcha.
Then they introduce these sloppy operating procedures, or SOPs.
Sloppy.
I know, it sounds messy, right? But it's actually about finding a balance between structure and flexibility.
Okay.
So it's like having, some guidelines for your creative work,
Right.
but still leaving room for spontaneity.
So it's like a framework, but not like rigid rules.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of structure, the author has this whole system called the creative cascade.
Ooh, I like that. Creative cascade.
It's like a series of inboxes for your ideas,
Okay.
and it helps you process them so that nothing gets lost.
So it's like taking all those thoughts swirling around in your head
Exactly.
and putting them somewhere safe.
Yes, getting them out of your head. Now, things get a little bit serious in the source material when the author talks about their mom.
Oh,
Their mom suddenly got very sick,
wow.
and it's a reminder that even with, the best of systems,
Yeah.
life throws you curveballs.
Like happens.
Yeah, exactly. And they were rushing to the hospital, dealing with, all the uncertainty.
Right.
And they talk about how their creative work actually became like a source of comfort during this time.
It's amazing how creative expression can be so therapeutic, right?
Absolutely. It's like a way to process your emotions.
Yeah.
Now, even though they were going through this really tough time, they still managed to stay productive in a way.
How'd they do that?
They organized their tasks based on their mental state.
Oh, interesting.
So they would tag tasks based on their energy levels.
Wow. So they would only work on things that match their current capacity.
Exactly. So even while they were, at their mom's bedside in the hospital, they were working on tasks that were tagged explore. And that helped them to, make some progress.
That's a great example of micro actions,
Yeah.
Even when you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Just doing a little bit can really help you feel like you're moving forward.
It's true. So we've come a long way from takeout on the floor in Chicago to embracing event time in Medellin.
It's been a journey,
It has.
but it sounds like their journey isn't over yet.
Oh, it's just the beginning.
Right. So before we took a little break,
Right.
we were talking about the author, dealing with their mom's illness.
Yeah, a really tough time.
Yeah. And it just shows that, no matter how prepared you think you are,
Right.
life can always throw you a curveball.
Exactly.
But even in the midst of all that, what really stands out to me
Yeah.
is the author's emphasis on having this trusted system.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Remember that creative cascade we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
Well, it becomes even more important when you're dealing with a crisis like that.
Right, because when you're in a crisis, the last thing you need is more stuff swirling around in your head.
Right, like to-dos, worries, all of that.
Exactly.
So having a system to get those thoughts out of your head
Yeah,
can really free up mental space,
absolutely.
to focus on what's important.
Yeah. And they were able to use that, even while going through this. They were still able to make progress on their work projects
Uh-huh.
by focusing on tasks that were, tagged explore in their system.
Right, that's a great example of those micro actions.
It is.
Like we often think that we need like hours and hours of uninterrupted time
Yeah.
to be productive.
Right.
But sometimes, just taking a few small steps can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so now the author's journey takes us to Panama.
Oh, Panama.
Yeah, and it gets a little bit wild.
What happened?
Well, they were dealing with visa issues.
Oh, no.
Construction noise. They even had a concert that got canceled.
Oh, wow.
It's like testing the limits of their productivity system.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a lot to deal with.
It is, but it's cool to see like how those systems hold up.
Right.
Even when things are crazy.
Yeah. So even with all that going on, they were still able to be productive, get things done.
Yeah, they had to constantly adjust their plans, find creative workarounds, stay focused despite all the distraction.
Yeah.
And I thought this was really impressive.
What's that?
They actually managed to record a podcast interview
Okay.
with David Rock.
Oh, wow. The Your Brain at Work guy.
Yeah, exactly. And they recorded it in a co-working space conference room.
Okay.
Surrounded by pillows.
Pillows.
Yeah, and battling a noisy air conditioner.
Wow. Talk about dedication.
I know, right?
That's amazing.
They weren't going to let a bad recording environment stop them.
Right. They had a mission.
Yeah.
So they're in Panama. Things are chaotic. They're recording podcasts in pillow forts.
I know.
What else is going on?
Okay, so now they start talking about these creative systems.
Okay, yeah.
And they use this really cool analogy of baking cupcakes.
Cupcakes. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like you use the same basic ingredients and process,
Okay.
but you can add different flavors and colors
Right.
to create a variety of cupcakes.
Different kinds of treats.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that.
And that's kind of how they see their creative work.
Gotcha. So it's like you can standardize certain parts of your work, but still be original.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And the system they have for their podcast is super detailed.
Oh, wow.
Automations for tasks,
Okay.
checklists for recording and publishing, even spreadsheets for social media.
Wow, they're really organized.
Yeah, it's impressive. But then they throw us a curveball.
A curveball. What's that?
Creative constraints.
Creative constraint.
Yeah, and it sounds kind of counterintuitive, right?
It does.
Right.
Wouldn't constraints limit your creativity?
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
But they argue that it can actually spark creativity.
Oh, interesting.
They use the example of developing their newsletter,
Okay.
Love Monday.
Love Mondays. Okay.
And they experimented with, different days of the week, different content sources, different formats.
So they were trying different things.
Yeah, to find what worked best for them.
So even with those constraints, they were able to create something really cool.
Exactly. And, this whole journey ends with them reflecting on their life in Medellin.
Okay. Yeah.
They talk about how their little experiment
Okay.
turned into this permanent life change.
Wow.
They've embraced the culture, found love, and built this really fulfilling life that blends creativity, work, and personal growth.
It's amazing how following your passion can lead to these unexpected outcomes.
Yeah, sometimes the detours are the best part of the journey.
They are.
Okay, so welcome back to the deep dive. This is the final part of our deep dive into mind management.
Right.
We've gone from Chicago to Medellin, talked about the brain, creative systems. What a ride, huh?
It has been.
But now I think it's time to distill it all down. What are the key takeaways?
Yeah, good idea.
And how can people actually use this stuff?
Exactly. Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that we need to shift our mindset from time management to mind management.
Because it's not about, cramming more tasks in. It's about creating the right conditions to do your best work.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is finding that creative sweet spot, right?
Absolutely.
Like the mental state where ideas just flow. And remember, sometimes that means being a little groggy.
Yeah, still crazy to me.
It's counterintuitive.
But, the research is there.
Yeah.
And the author's experience backs it up.
Yeah, so don't be afraid to embrace that less focused state sometimes.
Exactly. Sometimes that's when the magic happens.
And speaking of magic, those word triads.
Oh, yeah. Pine,
Yeah.
crab,
Yes.
sauce.
Exactly. They really show how creativity can just pop up when you least expect it.
Yeah, it's not always linear. Sometimes it's just boom.
Boom.
Right.
So how do we get more of those boom moments?
Well, the first hour rule is a great place to start.
Right. Spend that first hour
Yeah.
on your most important creative work,
Exactly.
and it sets you up for the rest of the day.
Right. Even if you're not a morning person, just finding some dedicated time
Yeah.
where you can focus free from distractions
Yeah.
can make a huge difference.
And remember, even if you feel stuck, just keep taking those small steps.
Right, the minimum creative dose.
Yeah.
It's a powerful concept. You don't need hours and hours.
Yeah, just a little bit each day.
And then let your brain do the rest.
Like the seed analogy.
Exactly. Plant those seeds and then be patient.
Exactly. Now let's talk about those creative systems.
Right.
With the SOPs,
The sloppy ones.
Yeah, the sloppy ones, and the task triggers, and the creative cascade. It's all about, having a framework,
Yeah.
but still being flexible, like finding that balance.
Right. It's not about being rigid.
And don't forget about building those anti-fragile systems.
Yeah, the ones that can handle life surprises.
Because as we saw with the author's mom, things don't always go as planned.
It's true.
Life throws curveballs, so you need systems that can adapt.
Absolutely.
So what are your final thoughts? Like, what's the one thing you want people to take away from all of this?
I think it's about embracing a life where things don't go as planned.
Ooh, I like that.
Let go of that need to control everything.
Yeah.
Be present, trust the process. You never know where you might end up.
Well said. So, to all of our listeners out there, ask yourselves, how can I be more open to the unexpected? How can I keep growing creatively even when life gets crazy? And remember, even small steps can lead to big results. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into mind management. Keep exploring, keep creating, and we'll see you next time.
Everyone.